Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the KimUnity Soulutions Podcast, the only podcast that turns workplace challenges into real-world solutions. I am your host, Kim the SME, and today is different. Today is special. Today we have a special guest, and it's not family this time, okay? Let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a health attorney. She practiced law for nearly a decade before transitioning into media, where she held a significant leadership role. She has served as editor-in-chief of Psych Central, becoming the first Black editor-in-chief at Healthline Media. She has been the VP and head of content for Well Good, leading with strategic vision for all editorial content. She is a wife, a mother of 3. That is the most important. She is the founder and president of Rest and Reclaim Retreats, specializing in curated day retreats for women and professionals. She is also a consultant for small businesses as well as Goldman Sachs. She is also an author, and she is also a founder of Culture and Quill, which we will get into. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage, Miss Faye McCray. Welcome, Miss Faye.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks for having me.
You are more than welcome. I am blessed to have you in my presence today. I have been doing my homework and researching you, and you have accomplished so much that I would like to get into today. So first of all, you received your BA in English at Binghamton University, your master's in writing at Johns Hopkins University, and you even went to the Howard University School of Law to receive your Juris Doctorate in health law. Tell me about those transitions, going from predominantly white institutions to a historically Black college and university.
Yeah, it was a really deliberate and an intentional choice for me when I decided to go to Howard Law in particular. So, as you mentioned, I went to Binghamton for undergrad, which is a state school in New York. I was the first of my siblings to go to college, and over the holidays, I was spending some time with my cousins, and they were like, "You were the first of all of us to go away," because no one had gone away yet. And it was sort of a big, bold decision. We were all very local, born and raised in Queens. So, when I went away, that was a big decision for me to go upstate in New York to go to college. And for the most part, I had a great experience. It was a predominantly white institution, but people we find each other. So I was on BSU, all the things, so I had my community. And of course, I've always been one to have a diverse group of friends, but I had this wonderful, beautiful Black woman English professor. Her name was Donette Francis. She had long locks. We all admired her. Like, we wore her classes out. We would take every class she offered, all the Black women at the school, and just hung on every word she said. And she was a Spelman grad. So she said at one point that every young Black person should have an HBCU experience. And I was like, what is this? I had never really thought about HBCUs growing up in New York, but decided, when I was getting ready to go to law school, to take a crack at applying to Howard, even though I don't even know if I had been to DC at that point in my life, maybe once as for a trip, with the family, but applied to Howard, got a scholarship, was really excited about it. And the first time I remember, at least in my adult life, coming down to the area was to look for apartments of where I was going to live when it was time to go to school. And it was hands down one of the best decisions I've ever made. I do firmly believe everyone a young person should think about having an HBCU experience, because you get to experience the diversity and breadth of the Black community. And I think when you grow up or you are in environments that are predominantly white, sometimes we feed into stereotypes of ourselves too, and don't know about all the beauty. And I was meeting Black folks from North Dakota and from Texas and, people who had generations of wealth. And then there were people like me who were from more urban environments. I met my husband at Howard. He was a Duke grad, so he'd also come up rather from a PWI, but it was just a beautiful experience. I mean, I feel like the Howard community is like having cousins in every state. Like, once you're in that network, it's just a really beautiful and fulfilling family to be a part of.
You have said so much just in that right there, because number one, representation is everything. to see
Yeah.
someone. And then it's so important to have that and have that role model. And that just having that part, it led you to Howard University and to all your other experiences. And I see you
Yeah.
have lots as well, so that maybe that inspired that as well.
Yes, that was a part of it for sure.
For sure, for sure. So that I totally agree. I went to Tuskegee University, so I understand. I started off, I'll go back to the beginning. I went to Marcus Garvey in Los Angeles, and then I went to a predominantly white school, and it was very small. It
Yeah.
was actually a house, and it was called Wise Oak School, and we had
Wow.
first and second grade in one classroom, third and fourth in another, fifth through eighth in another. So I have
Wow.
been privileged exactly to experience the best of both worlds as well. And having that diversity and being able to learn from everyone and see everyone's experiences gives you that different perspective. So I
Yeah.
totally hear you, understand, and definitely can relate to that. Now that you say that you all had this discussion about how you're the first to, go to college and well, not, you didn't actually go first because your mother went, right?
So my mom went back to school. So yeah, she went back to school in her early 40s. So did my dad actually as well. So I feel like I was a part of their kind of higher education journey. But still, I was the first of my siblings to go. My older brother chose not to. They were, were lifelong civil service employees and had wonderful careers. My middle brother was a police officer. He passed away. But my eldest brother also kind of worked for the federal government, lifelong. So it was a big thing, to kind of make this decision, to not just go, but to go away, which was sort of unheard of in my family.
Right. And it seems like everyone in your family served in some capacity. So you come
Yeah.
from a family of serving, regardless of
Yeah,
where it is.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, going and reaching that higher level of all of your siblings and being the first to be an attorney in your family, did it feel like you reached a pinnacle? Did it feel like you reached a certain thing? Because after that, you kept pursuing. You had different
Yeah.
goals and you had different dreams.
Yeah, I mean, I really do credit my mom a lot with that too. So when her and my dad divorced, education had always been important to her, but she had my older brothers fairly young. So, she was a mom, she worked, but she was also very much devoted to rearing and raising the kids. So, when they split up for her, it became really important for her to pursue her education. And I think watching her sort of navigate this big life pivot, right? Because she went from not just getting her bachelor's, but getting her master's. She graduated both with high honors. We were incredibly proud of her, but it also catapulted her to this sort of different level of life. So she ended up going into management and kind of climbing the corporate ladder and witnessing that, like her kind of come into her own. And then, of course, post divorce, she's dating, she's doing the thing, watching her be beautiful and, all the things I think for me really, really affirmed in me this idea that you can pivot, like you could sort of look at your life and decide you want something different. So, for me, law was certainly the goal. And, we felt so proud to make my family proud, and going into law and practicing law and all the things that came along with that. I got up to a point in my legal career where I was like, I think I want something else, and I had started freelance writing and started my own website and doing a couple of those things. And then sort of took the brave leap into media and journalism. And that sort of informed my decision to get my master's in writing, and do some other things there. But this idea that we kind of pick one path and that's it, and that's who we are. My oldest son is navigating this process now, getting ready to go to college. He's a senior, and it's like to think a 17-year-old could sort of make a decision that this is who they are for the rest of their life is kind of like bonkers if you think about it. Like we change, we grow, we experience new things, we learn new things about ourselves. So I think watching my mother be receptive to that has always made me receptive to that. Like I always talk about my life in decades. Like when I'm in my 50s, this is what I'm gonna, like I start to think about like the different versions of me I get to meet and, court and learn about, so I definitely felt proud, but also felt open, right, to kind of what else could come.
Yes, it's all part of the journey. It's all part of the
Yeah.
journey. I can totally relate. I was telling you before that, My daughters are in college and they are still trying to determine, okay, which way do I want to go? And you're not going to know what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. Just because you get it, pick a degree or declare a major doesn't mean you're going to be doing that forever. That's part of the journey and that's going to lead you somewhere. Those experiences, you will take that and those lessons along with you to apply to another destination.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yes, I totally. Now, I was reading one of your articles that you wrote. You are a tremendous writer. I want to
Oh,
tell you
thank
that is so relatable. You said in this article, you said you were a full-time attorney, you were a freelance writer, you were a cook, a housekeeper, a homework reviewer, a finance manager, and ignored your husband's attempts to help. We do so much. We want so much. We want to accomplish so much. Why is it so hard to ask for help?
Oof. I mean, right? There's so many reasons. I mean, there's definitely like the personal reasons behind that. Then there's being Black women, being women. I think too, watching a successful independent woman sort of navigate the world. I didn't learn a lot about what my parents divorced when I was officially like when I was about 8, but they had been separated for a while before then. I think it was maybe 6 when it was official. So I don't remember them really being married. And my brothers were 10 and 12 years older than me. So they were teenagers. They have, complete memory of their whole marriage. But for me, I for sure learned what it was to be an independent woman, right? And like know what I need. But the idea of like existing with someone, and my husband's from the South, and he's very much like, I'm gonna open the door, I'm gonna do all these things, I'm gonna be hands on. And it was an adjustment period, especially early in our marriage, because I was of this like, I got it, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it, all the things to the point where I was exhausted, right? And it's just this idea of just being self-reliant as a sign of strength. And like, if you ask for help, sometimes it can feel like a sign of weakness when it's honestly at this juncture in my life, I've realized it's the complete opposite, right? Like the ability to be able to be vulnerable and to ask for help is a sign of strength. So it took a lot of like unlearning, and self-work, therapy, all the things in order for me to kind of come to a place where, I felt comfortable with that.
I can totally relate to that. And I thank you for sharing that because I know a lot of listeners or viewers can relate to that. They have so much to accomplish and we continue to put things on our plate when there are people around us that can help and take some of that weight off. And we see that as well in the workplace.
Yes.
There are, and as I was reading your article, there was so much that I could correlate to professional life and personal life because people always think of managers as having an ego and not being a team player, not being able to communicate with their team. But when I read that, it made me think like maybe they are too vulnerable to ask for help or to ask for guidance or to ask for their team's suggestions. Maybe they're scared of failure.
Yeah.
And that comes from, not having trust. And, I can go on and on into that part, but I was just seeing the correlation. And that's exactly what this podcast is about. It's about building the bridge between the two, whether it's leadership in your teams or if it's your family or you and strangers going across communities, regardless of race and religion and gender. These are just simple things that if we think about are easily identifiable and we're able to create a solution for.
Yeah. I just to that point, I've been doing a lot of interviewing for my book. So I'm working on a book right now about work and work identity. And I've interviewed a lot of managers as a part of that, people that I've met along the way, and there is a reluctance to be vulnerable as a manager because sometimes you have to make really, really tough decisions, and I think that there, especially among the men that I've interviewed with, this idea of kind of a business self and a personal self, and the two shall never meet. You have to kind of turn off your, not so much the empathy, but the part of you that may get sad if you have to lay someone off or, when it's hard to make those tough decisions. And people have a lot of trouble kind of marrying the two. What does it look like to be vulnerable as a manager? What does it look like to show that things impact you, and I think I found in my managerial journey that makes you a better leader, even when you have to make the tough decisions. But, it's a hard place to arrive.
I so agree with that. Now, again, there's several parts that I want to pick at right there. So you have a book. Are you working on it right now, or is it already out? Because I know you're author and you have others that we'll talk about.
Yes. Yeah, I have other books, but I'm working on a book about work and identity and just what makes us vulnerable to losing ourselves so much in our work identity. Like, what are the things that sort of lead up to that place where you look up and you're like, my life is all work, or, you're just completely vulnerable and susceptible to, what I'm calling, career enmeshment, which is when you just are so embedded in your work identity that you really can't see where you began and work ends.
Yes, we are definitely on the same page of that. And it comes down to empathy. And
Mm-hmm.
either they struggle with not having it or scared of showing it,
Yeah.
scared of exemplifying that. And I really feel that it's very difficult, if not impossible, to be able to lead without caring.
Yeah.
Because how do you get people on board? How do you get people to trust you and support you? How do you get people to communicate and want to collaborate with you? So having that kind of rapport with your staff, I think, is very important. And that's what makes the difference between a manager and a leader,
Yes. Yes.
is having that. So thank you so much. I'm gonna be your first buyer of that book when it comes out. For sure. Going back to law, you studied health law. Can you explain to us exactly what that means, who you really represent in that? Is it workplace health? Is it weight loss? Something's wrong. Your stomach is, what is it called with people taking all of these Ozempics and stuff? Their
Yeah.
stomach paralyzation. What kind of health law is it that you practice?
So, I actually didn't study health law in law school. It just so happened that that's the area of law that I wandered into after I left. So I started out like a lot of baby lawyers. We started out kind of clerking for judges. And, that was my first experience out of law school at the appellate level, which means, people have gotten maybe verdicts that they weren't happy with, and then they appeal to a higher level in DC. And then after that, got a job with the government in the health and disability space. So my job in that realm was like just primarily to evaluate people who were looking for disability benefit, whether or not, they had the right qualifications to get them. So I always think of it as like people really at their most kind of vulnerable state, really needing help. Maybe they can't work anymore, so they don't have a livelihood, and they're looking for support. So I represented the government at their highest level of appeal. So people have gone into local offices to seek benefits and have gotten denied. And then they go to that next level. And I think there's another one. And then they appeal to the highest level with the federal government to see if they can get support. So that's where I worked in the disability space.
Okay. And in that kind of position, in that kind of role, having empathy, I can't see having that position without having those cares and those feelings for those that are struggling or in need, or trying to discern in between the two.
Yeah, I mean, 1,000%. And I think for me, in particular, I was, I think, 3 weeks into my work with the government when my brother passed away. It was a very unexpected. He was a New York City police officer, 9/11 hero, and as many folks who were down there at Ground Zero just developed, issues as a result of breathing all that stuff in. So he was only 38 years old and thought he had a cold, and within 24 hours he was gone. And I was at work. I was 3 weeks in. I had done training, and then I had been placed in kind of the location where I was going to work. 3 days into that work week, got the call, and had to head to New York and check in on him. And I always tell that story because it informed a lot of things, for me. I think when you lose a sibling, in particular, when you lose a sibling young, you sort of then start to live life for them a little bit too. I want to make sure I do the things that he didn't get to do. But I think also working in health law, working in disability, I also recognized how much of our health we sacrifice for work. In his case, he went in that day very, very sick to work, and his colleagues were like, "Hey, you don't look so good. We think you need to go to the hospital." and he was taken to the hospital by his colleagues that day. But he had just this unwavering work ethic, as a lot of us do. We show up, we keep going, that, our livelihood is tied to our work. And I always thought, what if he had taken a day, and gone to see his primary care when he started to feel those symptoms a couple of days before, or maybe a week before. I remember my mom saying, he doesn't feel too good. He has a cold. And I remember texting him, like, go to the doctor, and like kind of moving from there. But he just didn't take that time to care for himself. So I think I always looked at that area of law with that lens. Like, these are people that need respite. They need money so they can heal, right? Or, if they have something chronic, maybe they can't, completely heal and they have to just take care of themselves. But people should be able to prioritize their health and wellness above work. So, when you say that kind of about empathy with the work, it was something I cared about deeply and always took really seriously, for that reason, because I really don't remember a time when I didn't have that lens, because it was in the wake of that big loss for me.
I'm so sorry to hear that. Continued blessings to you and your family going through that. We appreciate all the service that he has given to us, to our country. And that's very sad. And unfortunately, he wasn't the only one, and now that we're looking at these wildfires in California, it's just like a continued cycle that, we really need solutions for, and that empathy and policies. So what good is the empathy without those policies that go along with it, and advocates that can push and do everything that you're doing for everyone now. So, I'm sure he is so proud of his sister, for sure. Yes. So thank you for talking about that and sharing about the health locks. I was really curious when I was researching, because I've never heard of that phrase before, and I'm never afraid to say, I don't know, let me ask. So thank you for that. Sharing experiences are very important. I think it's so important for us to show that we are relatable, and, people that are listening to this, they're not alone. Other people are gone through it. This is how I handled it. It may not be your same experience or your same solution, but this is what I did to get through or to support other people. So thank you for that. Just as your brother was making sacrifices for his work, you have spoken and written about your experiences in the workplace, about how you were giving and giving. And we seem to find ourselves in these workplaces. We accept these positions, and I don't know how, but they seek us. They know we can do it. We are attracted to these. They are attracted to us, I should say. And we get in here and we try to make an impact. We try to, and I remember you saying it's because we are perfectionists. And I agree. However, I want to change the title of that and say that we care.
We care.
Because that puts a totally different feel to that. Words matter. And believe me, I've said I'm a perfectionist. I've said I'm an introvert and all that. But once you start putting yourself in those boxes and putting those boundaries around you, there's already that stigma and that feeling that you get when you say that. But we care.
We care.
So you went in this workplace, you accepted these positions, and you tried to tackle all of the issues that are going on and going wrong. And of course, we end up being successful, but it takes a toll on us. Can you talk about what happens and the result of doing too much, giving your all when you're not giving anything in return?
Yeah, I mean, I always joke too, anytime I'm sort of considering a new work relationship, that, I definitely had developed sort of this reputation for going into places that were in a bit of chaos and sort of needed somebody to put the pieces back together. And I sort of prided myself in that and didn't really look at, I have to throw myself thoroughly into these places. And because I consider myself an empathetic person, I take on a lot of people's big feelings too. Like, I'm a very people first leader. For me, it's not okay if the team's not okay. I want people to feel good about the work that they're doing every day. Yeah, I've been very deliberate about that in my leadership, but also personally. Like, I want to feel good about the work that I'm doing. And I try to lead with transparency, which is good. also it kind of opens the door to people to have very big feelings and emotions. And I can't turn off my empathy about that. Like I feel a lot of what other folks are feeling. So, for me, I think that I was doing that blindly for a long time, not necessarily taking inventory of how it was impacting me. I would at the end of the day kind of collapse, like in either on the bed or in my favorite chair and just kind of pass out. I was so tired and drained from everything. There were really key things that I was ignoring about my health for a long time, just in favor of getting it done and powering through the day, and it sort of came to a head, with a role that I took. And I hadn't been familiar with the term glass cliff until a friend of mine, kind of raised it to me that there are these roles sometimes that you take when things are just falling apart, and they tend to go to women, a lot of women of color, get kind of recruited into these places of like, everything's plummeting, fix it, So I got recruited into one of those roles, and the minute that I stepped in, there was just massive attrition. Like people were leaving left and right. Every couple of months there was a rift. And then there was the business, right? To stand up and fix and, all of the things. And at the same time, I was experiencing kind of a lot of these physical symptoms. And I was like, I don't quite know what's going on with my body. I started to get heart palpitation, all of these things. And, I was like, oh, it's, just stress, just anxiety, it'll be okay. I'll get a good night's sleep. I'll, do these things. And finally it just came to a head. I got a couple of, not life threatening, but kind of, scary diagnoses, that needed my attention. One of them required an iron infusion in the hospital. And I was powering up my laptop to work while I was getting the infusion, and I was going to take a staff meeting and do all these things. And I was like, oh, girl, like, you have a moment. I remember my husband came with me to one, and he's sitting across from me in the hospital room, just looking at me like, what are you doing? And it was just a moment of like, whoa, I'm giving. What am I getting back? And there comes a point where you're like, a paycheck isn't enough, like it's not enough. That doesn't fix everything. Like it is more important to me that I'm here for my family. It's more important to me that I'm here for myself, and that I'm in good health. And, obviously I have this instructive lesson of losing my brother. I need to change, I need to change things. So I think to me, it was really taking inventory of work as a transaction, it's not one-sided. You can't just give and give and give and not get something in return. You should have standards. You should have things that you want back, and I was better than a role that just required me to give of myself, and wasn't nurturing me. I think I had this expectation. I think we all do. You work hard enough and someone will say, that was great. Here's the whatever, and now everything is perfect. And, at the end of the day, I've sat across from people at enough tables making really hard business decisions to know that businesses look out for themselves first. So you have to look out for yourself.
So good. So good. Business look out for themselves. Work is a transaction. And like you said, we give and give and give, and we don't get anything in return.
Yeah.
And I have experienced the same thing. But before I get into that, I want to talk about solutions. So
Yeah.
this podcast is KimUnity Soulutions, but it's spelled like soul, it's like spirit solutions. And I truly believe that most solutions are simply one-sided opportunities. What we need are solutions with souls in mind, with people in mind. They should be mutually beneficial. It should never be one-sided. So you're right. We get in these roles. We take it on because I'm not sure how you grew up, but my parents were, you finish the assignment, you show up, Black people have to go above and beyond. And, you can do it. You're intelligent. You're this, you're that, which of course I am, but it doesn't mean I need to take on everything.
Yeah.
And so in a leadership role, it's important to delegate. When you're in the staff level role, how do you suggest people say, I can't do this, or this workload is too heavy? Because you've been in those leadership roles. What do you say to those people who are taking on too much, maybe afraid of the repercussions of confronting management leadership? What do you say to those people?
Yeah. I mean, I would say first it starts before you say yes to the job. right?
Okay. Yes.
Like I do this kind of fun thing on TikTok where I look at job descriptions and I look for red flags in them because if I have to look back on those experiences that weren't great, work wise, there were always little telltale signs, kind of in walking, yeah, and reflect. It's just like, okay, you ignored this, you ignored that. So I think it really starts with owning the job search process in a way that you do not forget that you are interviewing these jobs just as much as they are interviewing you. So you want to make sure that you are clear on what you want. And when you go into those interviews, have a couple of questions to make sure that the job is aligned with you. I know at this juncture in my career, when I'm looking at different opportunities and, especially when you're interviewing for these executive level roles, you get like 90 interviews. Like there's just so many interviews that you go through, right? For a lot of these roles. But I think it's such an opportunity too, because you meet people cross functionally, you meet people across the team. One of my favorite questions to ask people is like, do you have time to do the things that you love? In addition to, and it almost inevitably people start stuttering. Well, like I, I talked to my boss about it, and it's a very interesting question to ask because it really highlights, like, is this a culture of overwork? Is this a place that doesn't respect boundaries? Are you getting emails on the weekends? Are you getting emails in the evenings? Is there an expectation that you're going to respond to them? You can see that too in job postings. One of the things that is a huge red flag for me is small but mighty teams. Like I'm as hard of a worker as anybody, but I cannot have 72 jobs under one umbrella, with one paycheck. So I like to pay close attention to those sorts of things, that kind of intense, managing multiple deadlines at a time, all of those things to me tell on themselves of like a culture that maybe is not necessarily shored up enough, to allow people to just do their role and be able to leave. But I think once you're in those roles, I think for me, I know the biggest barrier early in my career, I was definitely a people pleaser. I wanted everybody to be okay. I wanted everybody to know that I was a hard worker. So I said yes to all the things, right? And I think it's empowering your no, like the ability to be able to say no. And I know that that is a tough thing for a lot of people, but I think it's all in the finesse and how you say it. If someone asks you to work late, I had an experience once where it was work travel and I was clear that I had to be back on a certain day, for an obligation with my family. But there was a full day of activities kind of that day before. So I would have to leave halfway through the day in order to get back in time for everything. And I had a boss actually suggest that I take a red eye so that I could stay the full day and then still return. And I was like, well, when would I sleep? Like, I got to be awake and alert for this family stuff too. So I said very clearly, I very much want to be a part of the team. I think clarity is key, right? Compassion. I know how important it is for us all to be there, but no, I need my sleep. I want to make sure that I won't be good for anybody. I'm prone to migraines. Like I don't want to get a headache, like I want to make sure that I am good. So I think, being clear on what your no's are is really, really important. And I think if you gotten, the finesse and the compassion of saying it, of artfully saying it, I think that you can still be a team player and let people know sort of where those boundaries are for yourself. And it's a practice and it's a muscle and you have to get used to it. But I will say this, once you get accustomed to those no's, they are so delicious and amazing. And it's like, once you own them, it's, you know what I mean? Like you don't have to be mean about it, but
right.
It's important for you to own that and know that. And as a leader, I have to say, I have respected that in terms of like when people set boundaries and parameters, I know what it is. As long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, you're getting the assignment done, you're doing the things that you need to do. If you're like, I can't, it's 7:00, I'm not going to get on that's fine, but it's just a matter of being clear.
Yes, you have touched again on so many things. I want to talk about, and I love the angle you took on when you said you look at all of this through TikTok and you make comments on what they're asking for and all of that. I love that. I've always been looking at it from the other side of it. I've been telling people, be mindful of what you're putting on your resume. So often we are trying to cater to their needs. So often we are looking at that job description and catering our resume to show that we can meet that. No, set yourself apart. Tell them exactly who you are, how you work, what environment you're looking for so that those people can find you. Otherwise, you're attracting the people that you don't want.
I love that so much. Yeah,
Yes.
that's great.
And
Yeah.
and I remember I had been laid off of one of the jobs that, was very stressful and challenging. And I came to that realization and I told my husband, like, I'm like you said, reflecting, I need to make some changes on my resume because I'm putting what they want to hear. Let me put on here what I want because I'm not going to go through this again. And so if I read you, you'd be fall on the floor. He was like, oh, you must not be trying to get a job, And I was like, no, I am. They're going to reach out to me. They're going to know exactly what they're getting,
Yeah.
And so I did. I submitted it. It did take a minute, but the right company did reach out to me and hire me. And they respected me and understood exactly what I was saying that I'm about, that I stand for, my mission, my values. And thankfully, they were all in alignment. So we have to be mindful of what we're putting out there because that's exactly what you're going to get. And so on your side of it, you're saying that, hey, look out for this. So I appreciate all of that.
Yeah. And I'll say too the quiet part out loud because I know for a lot of people when you hear things like this, well, I need an income, right? I need a paycheck. I need money. And sometimes I think we compromise a lot, in order to get those paychecks. And it's understandable. I mean, what is more, important than, invaluable than that stability? You want to be able to provide for yourself and your family. A lot of times your health benefits are tied to your work environments, so I think on the other side of that for me, and, I have a dear friend who's just a fantastic financial advisor, and what for me is so important is that you have income diversity, right? Like you think of other ways to make money outside of your 9 to 5. I worked for that government job, practicing law for 10 years. It was a wonderful experience. And I think I had been lulled a little bit into this idea of, good government job, it's stable, you're
You
going to
can
have the paycheck
retire.
forever. Yeah, and one of those years was one of the times when the Congress was at an impasse and there was a furlough, and then here you go, all of a sudden you're not getting a paycheck. And you have to really confront the fact that, like, the idea of putting all of your eggs into one basket for your financial stability is not the smartest thing in the world. You got to think of other ways to, whether it's monetizing hobbies or thinking of ways to make passive income. But I think we should always have multiple income streams because it gives us the freedom to say no. It gives us the freedom to walk out of toxic environments, but it's just so key.
Yes, you are absolutely right. And when I was laid off, thankfully I contributed to the 401k. But when it was the like entire location was basically getting laid off. And I had realized at that moment that there were people that had worked there longer than me that did not do that. They didn't have anything put to the side because we're always in the mindset of, I need that or I
Yeah.
can't afford that. But like you said, it's so important to put something to the side. Let your money work for you,
Yes.
in the best way possible. And you have to start from somewhere. So thank you so
Yeah.
much. You're right. That was the elephant in the room. I wasn't even thinking of that aspect of it. So now you were talking about empowering your no and how you were working during, family turmoil. I experienced the same thing. She'll get mad if I say it, but I had a family member who got really sick and I flew back home to California and I am there by the bedside and I have my laptop and I'm working and maybe 3 days in and I've been trying to stop drinking coffee, but something told me, just go ahead and go in between these doctors coming in this room. Go ahead, get you some coffee. It was right across the street. I got in the car. I went across the street. And as I made the intersection, I was hit hard by an oncoming car. Ambulance came. They brought me back. And I am over here trying to act like I didn't get hurt, even though I'm taking breaks and going to see a doctor myself in the same hospital that this person is in. I am in the ambulance on the back seat calling my manager like, hey, I've been in because I'm an accountant by degree. And it was like month in and I'm trying to let her know that, I've been in this accident and the reports, I'm still going to get them to you. And it's not so much that she was even requiring that. It was more about how I felt about
Yes.
my name, and it's my responsibility. And, I'm not a flake. When I show up, I'm coming 100%. I'm coming prepared. And sometimes we just put so much pressure on ourselves. Sometimes we have to say no to ourselves, not just everyone else. Sometimes we just have to say no.
Yeah.
You've done a good job. And like you said, you mentioned perfectionism. Sometimes we just have to say, you've done great.
I mean, I love that so much,
done
this idea of saying no to yourself. I actually recently wrote a post about this for my newsletter, What If It All Works Out. I was talking about kind of day one after I left that role, after I finally was like, I need to go. For the first time in my adult life, I quit something without another thing lined up. I was like, I had a couple of like consulting clients and some things too, post bonus season. So I had been very strategic to make sure I was okay financially, but I didn't have a full-time role to walk into. And that morning when I woke up, the first thing I started to do was create my to-do list, right? Of like, let me do this, let me do this, let me make sure, gotta contact this person, gotta set up these meetings. And before I knew,
I want to ask you what your sign is so
I'm a
bad. What is your
Cancer. I don't know
sign?
if I necessarily give it to the stereotype there. But before I knew it, I'm like filling up my days like it's, I'm like I have a full-time role again. And I was like, girl, like you are the problem. When you talk about saying no to yourself, I had to say some hard no's to myself. It was just kind of like, oh, okay. Like you've perpetuated this, like you've been the one factor in all of this. And I could have easily worked my way to burnout, even as kind of, working independently and working for myself, so I had to create some boundaries around it. And I started asking myself questions to sort of vet out the urgency. Like, is this urgent? Like, why does this feel so urgent? Like, does this have to happen today, or can I do this in a week? Like, why do I feel the need to cram everything into every minute of the day? So that no to yourself, I would say almost start there, right? Because you really got to get comfortable with that, especially like you said, certain personality types, like you really got to figure that out.
Yes, yes, yes. And it comes down to being able to do that means you're self-aware. So you have to become self-aware. You have to be able to sit back and say, okay, what am I doing? It's that introspection and not blaming everyone else all the time. Sometimes we play a role in our own pain. So yes, I totally get it. So now I want to move over to your sons. You have 3 boys. One is about to graduate. How are you sharing these experiences with them as they enter the next level? Is it out of fear? Is it out of preparation? I read in an article that you wrote, and it was called Confronting My Fear, Lessons from Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. Okay. And in this, you said, with your children, you were always so protective. You were saying, don't get too close to that child. Don't be the loudest at the party. Don't touch other kids' toys at the playground. I do the same with my girls because I want everything to be right. I don't want anything to be misunderstood. Even now when they're older now, young adults, and I tell them, like, once I started having them handle some of their own responsibilities, especially phone calls, I would tell them, you get on the phone and you have to act like you know what you're talking about. Don't get on there saying, I don't know. You get on, you prepare yourself before you get on, because otherwise they're going to play you. They're going to take advantage of you. And it's so much that sometimes we put all this pressure on the kids. And so when I read that, I could totally understand. And you said in here, I am hard on my boys because I want to protect them. But the reality is protection can be suffocating. I am chipping away at their beautiful spirits so easily. That can be done. And so difficult it is to even correct that, if that's possible. What are you saying to your kids as they see you taking on all these roles and your experiences in the workplace? What is that conversation like?
Yeah. It's funny. So thank you so much for bringing up that article, because, I remember reading that book and being so moved by it. I think I used to hold a lot of shame for being so protective, but I've realized since then that it really is self-preservation, especially as Black people, as Black mamas, it was a survival thing, right? To make sure that it was palatable and people felt comfortable around us and, all of those things, so I think it's just part of the journey. I love, my littlest is 8 and my older boys are 14 and 17. But I have loved taking them on this journey with me. I was very, very transparent about reaching that point of burnout with them, what that looked like, kind of my lifelong journey with work and how that has sort of factored into sort of where I've arrived and why I felt like I need to start my own business at this juncture. Time will tell kind of what they've taken from it, but it was really important for me, especially with my oldest as he's starting sort of his journey. So he's a musician, he's a pianist, he's a jazz pianist, he's incredibly talented, but he's also very gifted academically. And he made the choice to apply to business schools for him for college. And it was almost a difficult decision for my husband and I because we've always known him as this artist. And my assumption was that he was going to go into music full time and this is what he was going to pursue, but for him, he wanted to nurture these other sides of him that were beautiful. But immediately, I start thinking this beautiful golden boy, this musician sitting in a cubicle somewhere, like working in corporate. Yeah. Like it was just, oh gosh, I don't know that I want that for you, so it was really, really important to me that he preserved those beautiful parts of himself and that he does take ownership of the journey and he vets, these opportunities, that he recognizes that his gifts are his gifts and he's protective of them because it is so easy for you to lose yourself. So I think my transparency about my own journey has been very deliberate for that reason, because I want them to kind of go into a place knowing, the value that they're bringing, that they're not commodities, that they need to be in environments where they feel not just that they're happy with their paycheck, but that they're happy with their growth, that they're able to protect their mental health, that they're able to prioritize their physical health, that, for him, he never wants to stop playing, that he's still able to prioritize his music and, all of those things. So, it's really important for me to take them on that journey.
Yes, that is so beautiful how you worded that, because as parents, like you said, we want to protect our children. We want them to leave the house prepared and aware and alert and knowledgeable. But at the same time, we have to give them their wings and let them explore and let them find out things through life through themselves. I can recall, when I started Tuskegee University, my major was political science. And that was because my parents were like, oh, you debate so well. You always get something to say. You'll be a great attorney. And, so I majored in political science. But later, my third year, I'm like, I really love numbers, and we've talked about Howard and we've talked about Tuskegee. And I just want to say that, shout out to both of them, to all HBCUs. But when we speak about them, it's always about the university and not about the community that it's in. So I just wanted to shout out, the local community that supports them as well, because the community is part of the faculty, is part of the student body, the student services and all that. So to all the cities that house these HBCUs, we salute you and we love you as well. Now, the second thing I want to mention, because I kept talking about California, me being from there and my experiences there, they are going through this, traumatic, horrifying wildfire experience right now. There are many employees out there who are still employees, but don't have the infrastructure of an employer. And as I was preparing for this episode, speaking with you today, I'm trying to figure out what is it that they can do that's not being mentioned? What is it that they can do? It's not like they can go outside and take fresh air, right?
Yeah.
Because of the smog and everything. My prayers and hearts go out to them. But what I was thinking was, you're still an employee. You don't have a job to report to, but there are benefits. Many of these positions offer you hotlines to where you can call if you have mental health issues or you need some kind of counseling. What else is there that they can do? I know you're real big on yoga and wellness retreats and mental health. What is it that is not being spoken about right now? They're only speaking about celebrities and physical things,
Yeah.
which is it's important. The physical things are important. The memories are important, but let's talk about the health part and the mental part.
Yeah, I mean, just along those lines, it's just devastating to watch. It's devastating to witness. I have a lot of friends and former colleagues in those areas, and it's just my heart has just been breaking just to see the devastation that's happening in those areas. It's hard, right? But this is one of those things that's, God willing, sort of a once in a lifetime devastation that you're going through. I think tactically and practically speaking, it's always important to sort of look at your finances and figure out what your options are. For better or worse, financial stability does feed into overall stability. That's kind of what it is. So I would say, that's an important sort of first step. But, it kind of goes back to that earlier conversation that we had about asking for help, and seeking support, especially kind of in the way that we all live today. We sort of end up raising our families in places maybe separate from where we grew up, and, we may be far away. What I have found, I'm consider myself introverted sort of by nature, like I have my people, but it's not always the easiest thing in the world for me to kind of lean in on like new adult relationships and things like that. But, I became proactive about that probably when I moved here 15 years ago, just to develop a community. And I found that there's so many people willing to form community, that are willing to help, so I would say, even if it's out of your comfort zone, speak, say what you need, even if you put out a call on Facebook, does anyone have this, or can anyone help with that? I think so many of us are scrambling to look for ways to support. So I think you'd be hard pressed to find people that wouldn't want to help or wouldn't want to support. So there's a great Brene Brown quote that says, like, shame not bear to be spoken. This idea of like, when you keep things in, it sort of eats away at you versus when you say them out loud. And I believe in the power of word, in asking for help and saying the thing, things come to you. I fully believe that. So, I would encourage people, if they're in situations where they're feeling like there's no way out, or they're feeling hopeless, or, they're feeling like they need support, to say something, to ask for support, to ask for help. The self-care tools are always great. I journal. I have a new journal I just bought. I was journaling before this call. All those things are important, but, sometimes we need like that practical support and help, to help shift and change our circumstances. So I would say the thing, ask for the thing, ask for help.
Yes, I'm so glad that you said that. That is an excellent point. And I too understand and know that word is very powerful, and just speaking and saying what you need. You'd be surprised where those resources will come from. So yes,
Yeah.
thank you so much for that as well. You have achieved so many levels, and I really don't like to go by titles, because I feel that I may have said this already too, but titles mean nothing. It's more about the work that we do and the impact, that the positive impact that we create, because we all have seen or believe we know that there are people in various positions that, are unfit to be there, whether it's personal, whether it's parenting, whether it's
Yeah.
professional or presidential. We all can point to fingers, but so many times people get caught up in titles and not in the work and the positive impact that they create. And I just wanted to say that, studying you and reading your articles and looking at your journey and what you're talking about, it is all one. It is all one. Your journey going through and working in health law, and having those experiences with your brother, having your own personal experiences that ended up placing you in the hospital, and creating solutions for those, creating retreats for those, creating culture and quill, speaking about strategic storytelling. Can you speak on how those experiences and how others' experiences are cultivated and how they should be shared? How those stories
Yeah.
can impact others?
I think this is what I love the most, like about being a woman of a certain age, is because you get to sort of look back on your life and see those points of connection and how one thing sort of led to the other. Oh, that door shut because I needed to go in this direction. And, it starts to make sense. And I think so after I left the role, prior to that, probably about a couple of months before when I knew I was coming to the end and I was like, yeah, I got to make a move. I sent an email. I'm a big proponent of networking, in all directions. I'm not just like an aspirational networker where I'm like, oh, I'm going to meet this person I admire. I like meeting everybody, everybody in all different directions. Cause I think, there's so much synergy and things to be learned through that process. But I sent an email out to my network saying, hey, thinking about consulting, if you know anybody who could use my skill set, here's the things I'm good at, just a very sort of open email, to my group. And I got a couple of bites back. Some people like, hey, I think you'd be excellent at this, or I think you'd be excellent at that. So I just started trying out different things. So when I left, the role I had, this really kind of great consulting gig sort of, to kind of fill that space like right after I left, and what I learned, ended up being one of the things that I pride myself on, is storytelling. It's just something that I love doing, not just from my own perspective, but I love meeting people, particularly businesses and entrepreneurs, and learning their story. Cause I find that a lot of times there's a disconnect with like, what your story is and maybe what you're trying to sell. Not necessarily a real disconnect, but just one that's perceived. Like if you go to someone's website, you may not necessarily understand, oh, this beautiful person, went through this and this is why this is important. So I founded Culture and Quill because I found this really nice space in strategic storytelling that's been informed both by my legal career and by my career in media, where I could really help people synthesize, like, what are those gaps? And I love to give the example. I was at a farmer's market over the summer here in Maryland, and I met twin brothers who were candle makers. And they had started to make candles, young Black men, they had started to make these candles during the pandemic in honor of their mother. I mean, it was just this beautiful story. The candles smelled amazing. We bought like all of these candles. We were so excited. And then I got home and like anybody, very ready to like sort of brag about it on social media, like, look what I got. And I went to their website and their story was nowhere. Like they didn't have anything. It was just the candles, I don't even think so much as a hand making them, it was just kind of just these candles on the page. And I thought, what a missed opportunity. Like there's just these points of connection when we hear each other's story and when we learn the why. And I think people want to shop with intention. They want to make decisions with intention. So, I launched Culture and Quill as a way to sort of help brands and individuals sort of bridge that gap. And it's been great work. Like I've been, excited about the most random things. I met a couple that owned an HVAC company they were from Ecuador, and they were really passionate about starting this business as a legacy for their daughter. And, like it was just incredible. And it's been really, really fun to bring those stories to life, to sort of help, these folks, not even just secure, this audience, but also funding, that's critical to business owners too, when they're seeking funding to really, hit those points of emotion and connection.
Yes, I love that. And you're right. Storytelling, that's what attracts people to your product and your service, is seeing how you've gotten from point A to point B, what all you've overcome and all that. And I see that you've been on many stages. You've been on South by Southwest platforms. You've had these speaking engagements. I've seen you on major TV networks. So you are doing your thing. You are definitely a powerhouse. What are you looking forward to next?
Yeah, I mean, this book, I just described it to a friend as life's work. It felt so. After I left the role, I did a vision board. I'm a big proponent of like just putting things out there. And one of the things that I ended up putting on my vision board was a picture of Greece. Just a couple of weeks after I did that vision board, I got a note from someone on Instagram that they were hosting a writer's retreat in Greece. And I probably, up until I got on that plane, I didn't think I was going. I was kind of like, I don't know. It's around school start time. I don't know if I'll be able to do this. It's expensive. Like, how am I going to make this happen? But the stars just aligned and I was able to make it work. And I went to this retreat and sort of buckled down and started working on this book, telling my own story, telling the stories of friends, but really talking about what it means to liberate ourselves, and what it means to take radical autonomy over our careers and develop a healthier relationship with ambition and work and drive. So I worked on it, while I was, away in Greece, and been working on it ever since, really kind of like head down interviewing and writing now. But that is the thing that I'm looking the most forward to, is like, I feel like it was put in my path for a reason, that, like I said, the stars just aligned and got me to Greece and, doing all these things. So I'm looking forward to this book. I'm looking forward to meeting more people and talking about their experiences with work. But, again, just open to whatever comes next with life.
I love that. I wish the best for you. Again, I will be purchasing it for sure. Tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah. So I'm on social media at Hey Faye McCray on Instagram and on TikTok. I'm also on LinkedIn at Faye McCray. And I have a wonderful newsletter called What If It All Works Out that comes out weekly. So feel free to subscribe to that.
Yes. And I thank you for being here. And as you're talking about Greece, and I'm thinking about all that we've discussed and just navigating. And what I want everyone to understand is that when I think of the word navigating, and I had an episode on this, when I think of the word navigating, I'm thinking of roadblocks and detours and bumpy roads and just the struggle of getting there. We shouldn't have to navigate the workplace. We shouldn't have to navigate corporate America. Once we navigate to get there, we should be able to just work. We shouldn't have to figure out the do's and don'ts of the workplace. And wherever I go, once I get there, I should say, I am really trying to transform it and not navigate it. So I want everybody to just look at maybe how you're contributing to your own environment and what can you do better? What can you speak out about? What can you use as an example or share your story, just as Faye has been speaking about and sharing her story. And it's been a pleasure. I am honored to have you as my first guest outside of my daughter. And I hope you have enjoyed this podcast episode as much as I have. I truly appreciate you.
Thank you, Kim. Absolutely. It's been great.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. You all tune in, check out Faye. She's giving you all the information. I will include all of her links in the information below. So please check her out. As always, I am Kim, the SME. You have been listening to the KimUnity Soulutions Podcast, where we transform workplace challenges into real world solutions. You all be blessed. Bye-bye.